Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about watercolors and what they can do. Now, as you can see, my paper is kind of filled out, so what I'm going to suggest that you do is pause the video at this moment and fill out your half watercolor paper so it looks like mine. There's a couple of different things we're going to practice here, so you're going to need to do that. So this is an opportunity to pause and write this all in. Okay, so watercolor is a medium that is very light, as it says in the name. Water needs water in order to actually be used. Now, some of the supplies that you'll probably be using often, okay, are the paint trays. Okay, it comes like this. As you can tell, this one's a little bit messy, but for the most part, they should be clean. If they ever get muddy, that means that you've been double dipping or you've been mixing the colors. What I would suggest is excuse me, getting your paintbrush a little bit wet, okay, then picking up the paint, washing off your brush, picking up more, washing off, or just taking a paper towel and blotting it out, okay? You don't want to mix. Paintbrushes. There are two different kinds of paintbrushes that you're going to be using. These are the soft kind, okay? You don't want the coarse ones. You either have round or flat. With any kind of paintbrush that you're using, you want the right size or the right tool for the right job, okay? So if you're doing a small area, you want a small brush. If you want a large area, you obviously want a larger brush. Do not try to think that you can do a small area with a large brush, okay? These brushes are very soft. They hold the watercolor very nicely. Other things that you'll probably be needing is some kind of water dish or tray. I'm using just a small little dish. Definitely use the the larger buckets, containers, absolutely fine. And last but not least is a palette, okay, a paint tray or a palette, actually it's a tray you need in order to mix your colors with. Okay, so here we go. A couple of things. First is whenever we're mixing, all right, we don't want to mix in here into the actual tray. You want to make sure that you mix in the tray. And if we're making any kind of dark or light colors, you need to kind of mix different shades, all right? So that means if you want a darker, brighter color, you're going to use a lot less water and more paint. If you want a light color, you're going to add a lot more water and becomes like a wash or very light. Now, as you can see here, I do have other kinds of watercolor mediums, okay? I have pencils, so if you need to do like small details in small little areas and the brushes aren't, you're not able to control it as easily, you may use some of the watercolor pencils there. All you do is you color them just like regular color pencils, and then you get your brush and you add water and you're able to paint that smaller area. Okay, so a couple of things about watercolors. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a light color and we're going to put a dark color on this circle. All right, so in order to create a dark color, you need very little water. So I'm going to take a little bit of water, and how I'm doing this is I'm taking my brush and I'm dipping into the water and I'm just like kind of pulling it off, all right? So it slips into the actual paint well. I'm going to take a lot of paint, mix it in. Now that's kind of on the light side. You can kind of see when you're moving around. So I'm going to dip off some of my water and then do that. Now there's a saying that I tell my daughters, okay? It's dip, dip, tap, tap, okay? It's an easy way to remember to make sure that you get all the water off, okay? So you don't want to be dripping it. So dip, dip, tap, tap, and that should be enough. All right, so I'm going to get a little bit more. Not real thick. Okay, so lots of paint, very little water. I'm going to paint the inside. I'm going to just swirl around. Now, each paintbrush will give you a different kind of look, all right? This is a flat, so I'm able to do flat areas really quick. And don't worry, if you have a round, it's okay. Go around real quickly. All right. Now, one thing about when you're painting things next to each other, okay? Now, as you can see, going right up to the edge of my pencil. Now, when you're drawing, you want to make sure that you draw nice and light because pencil markings can be seen through the watercolors, okay? So now I want to make this really light. So I'm going to add some water, lots of water to this. Okay, so you want this to dry, because if not, what's going to happen is if I take water and I paint up to it, it's gonna bleed out, all right? So you don't want wet. It can be, you know, that's kind of dry. You just gotta be very careful. Okay, so we're gonna go around it. Oops, got a little wet. Always have a paper towel. Blot that off. You don't want to have your paint pooling, okay, making little puddles, because what happens is if you pick it up, it will run, and if that's not what you're looking for, you don't want necessarily drips all over, okay? And special thing about watercolor paper, it holds the water really nicely, but if you keep going over and over and over and over and over and over, notice what's happening? This is called overworking the area, okay? The paint is actually, the water is being absorbed by the paper, okay? And it's peeling up. See all that? That's all paper. You don't want to do that, okay? All right, so that's how you go about painting different areas and making dark and light colors. Masking tape. If there's an area that you want to save, okay, so you don't want it or you want a straight edge, okay, there is painter's tape. Now, the painter's tape, I have, one thing is, it's blue most of the time. I will label always inside painter's tape, okay? If you don't have painter's tape, taking regular masking tape and then taking it and putting it onto your pants, okay, and peeling it up, what you're doing is you're getting some of that fuzz up. And it's not as sticky. That's what you're looking for. So I'm going to take a little piece of this. I'm going to seal it down, okay? Now, I don't want it to be completely, you know, stuck to it. Just want to put it down. So I'm going to take a little bit of paint, and I'm going to go straight over it, all right? So I'm basically sealing this area up, and I'm going to paint over it. I'm going to let this dry. So we're going to go back, we're going to go move on to dabbing. And then when that's dry, we'll peel that up, and you'll see how cool that is. All right, so dabbing, it's kind of like stippling, honestly. It pretty much is. So I'm going to take some of this and just, you know, dabbing. And you can do different colors. So let's say I want to make this another color. Make sure you wash your brushes in between colors, too. You don't want to, as I said before, contaminate other colors. So let's say I want this to be ooh, well, that's fancy. Okay. You can definitely dab, and it'll start blending, and it'll have a really cool look to it, okay? All right, let me see if I can get this right. It's a tough word. Straffito, okay, is kind of like when you use the end or a sharp point to actually do things. So we're going to use blue, okay? So I'm going to take blue, and while quickly going through, I'm going to pull out and draw into it. What happens is the paint is pulling into those areas, so I'm actually drawing into the actual, you know, paper, okay, just by scratching it. So you can actually add a lot of details by actually, you know, scratching right into it. All right, I wonder if this is dry. Hey, that could have been a little bit drier. Hot dog, right? Pretty cool. Okay, so overpainting, we might need to come back to that. So we're gonna just do a little bit and go back to it. So for this one, all we're gonna do is we're gonna take a light color, okay, and you're just gonna paint this little section, all right? Now, as it kind of says, overpainting, it's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna paint over it, but we gotta come back to that. All right, so textures. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do textures. You can take, you know, a very coarse brush, all right, and you can dab it, like just dabbing here. You can take this really coarse brush, and you can take it and you can flick at it. Okay, see how that's coming out. Now, I personally don't like the idea of splatter paint, okay, so that's not a skill that I want to see you do. But if you want like spray like this, take a very short brush. I also have toothbrushes, and you just kind of like pull it back and it will spray it, okay? There's a couple of ways that you can do some textures, okay? Now also, as you can see right here, I have some different color variations. That definitely helps. All right, lifting. This is definitely a huge help, okay? Let's say you're painting and you decide, oh, I'm gonna paint the sky, all right? So I go and I paint. All right, I'm gonna grab my paper towel and you wanted some clouds. Pretty cool, right? So you lift it right up. So instead of worrying about making their white areas, you can actually lift out some spaces, okay? This also helps you with blending too. Also, let's say you make a mistake, all right? Watercolors is a little bit more challenging because you kind of need to watch what's going on. So what you're gonna do is you would actually let this dry. Okay, I'm gonna clean off my brush. All right, I'm gonna wet this little area right here. And then what you can do is you can pull up the paint. Now, you're not gonna be able to pull up the paint all the way, all right? You just gotta wet it a little bit and pull it up so it's not as noticeable, and then you can paint over it, okay? That's all dry. So painting over it, very cool. This definitely adds like some layers and depth to things. You can paint straight over, all right? Gives it a real nice richness to things, all right? See how cool that is? So don't be afraid to be able, say, oh, I already painted. Well, no, you can go over it. Probably like 1 or 2 times, but I would suggest that you let it dry in between each one, okay? Because if not, remember back here where it came out and kept rubbing it? You don't want that. Okay, actually let's get a little kind of crazy here. Ooh. Okay, very pretty. All right, 2 cool things. All right, this last 2 are salt and wax resist. All right, now when we're using salt, it actually gives it like a speckled effect, kind of like the texture. So I'm gonna use, I'm really liking the blue. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna use a lot more blue. Alright, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to paint it. I'm going to take a little bit of salt. And I'm going to add a little bit more water because it wasn't going fast enough. Okay, salt. It's really cool. So what happens is it soaks it up. You have to let this dry. So we probably won't be able to like brush this off until we're all finished with the rest of it. But it soaks it up in like little speckles and it gives a really neat effect. Wax resist, all right? This was what you probably did long ago in elementary school, where if you took like a white oil pastel or any kind of color or crayon and you drew it and then you paint over it. So let's say you want white in some place, okay? Let's say I want this area, I need to stay white. So I'm gonna go in with my crayon, okay? And I really want this spot to be super white. So I'm gonna color that in. What's happening is the crayon is creating a wax in that space, okay? I'm gonna take mine. Let's do purple this time, okay? When I go over, it's just gonna peel off of it. Okay. Obviously, you get a little pooling there, which I could probably soak that right up. All right. But for the most part, I've saved that area by putting a wax resist. Okay. By basically putting crayon on it. Okay. Here we go. So all I'm doing is I'm wiping off my brush, and I'm pulling up the rest. All right. So anything that you want to stay white, and you're like, I can't get any paint on this, color with white. We'll get rid of them. All right, so those are different kind of techniques that you can use with watercolor. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on how do we blend these, okay? How do we go from a dark to a light color? How do we blend from one color to the next, okay? Now there's 2 different ones. We have a graded wash, and we can do it with wet, or we can do it with dry. Basically a wash is a solid color, okay? Light color. So I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna take this. And one way you can do this is you can, work really fast. So I'm gonna kind of wet this area. Okay, wet it real fast. And then how I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let it bleed, all right? Now what I'm doing now, this is very fast, and we have a large area, so you can kind of play with this, is I kind of put a lot of color at the top, and I kind of lift it up. Right. I'll go back in with my paintbrush, dry it off a little bit, dab, 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 and I will pull down, like it's almost like I'm petting the paper, okay, the color, all right, and I'm going to add some more water and pull it down, all right? So that is, you know, using wet. So it would be called wet on wet. So I wet the area, I take this, I put some paint on, I dried off my brush, got it with regular water, and then I kind of pulled it out because I went dab, dab, dab. I said tap, 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 okay? And then I pulled it down. Dry, okay, it's like, don't wet the area. I need some more paint. Okay, is when you take it and it's all dry, all right? I kind of work the opposite way. So it's dry, but then I pull it into the other one. Okay, this one's a little bit more challenging, but it's not really, okay? You just go back and forth and very, very lightly patting the surface so you kind of blend them through, okay? And I would suggest maybe trying that a couple of times in different spaces if you can, okay? Other ones are pretty easy to work with. Ooh, that looks so cool, okay? But this was definitely one that's a little bit more challenging and you might want to practice a little bit more. Streaking, this is not us running around with our tushies hanging out. I know you're all laughing, it's okay, I laughed too. All right, streaking and blending is really neat because what you can do is you can kind of like create streaks, okay? And just kind of pull it through. Okay, all I did was like light lines all the way through. Let's see if I can get another one. Gotta mix some colors. Okay. All right, so streaking, straight lines, all right. Going with a different color, kind of go, and when I do any of this, it's almost like I'm pressing harder and then I'm lightly bringing it up, okay? All right, so watercolors, lots of fun, okay? It just takes a little bit of practice to get used to this kind of a medium. Different kind of techniques that you can do, all right? Blending, you can do it wet, or you can do it dry, or you can do it streaking, which is either one. But I would definitely go and make sure that you've practiced these if you need to. After this is all dry, you can practice on the back, all right, with any of these